Papers on the porch were heavy with rain, 2 days worth. The kind of ordinary detail that doesn't mean anything until it suddenly does. So a neighbor knocks. Nothing. The house feels so still. The way a house feels after a storm, when it's not just quiet, but empty in a weird way. She circles to the back. The sliding glass door is cracked open. She calls out, "Robin?" For a moment, it was just silent. Then small, uneven footsteps. A toddler appears in the doorway, clutching a pacifier. Eyes wide and unfocused. She's alive. She shouldn't be alone, though. The woman walks inside, scoops the child up, and feels the dry heat of her skin, dehydrated, hungry, wearing the same clothes she had on 2 days ago. When she steps into the hallway, she sees it. Dark stains on the wall. The faint metallic smell of old blood. Down the hall, the master door is open. She can see the shape of something against the bed. And that is where the world ends for everyone who loved Robin Lawrence. Because what they found inside that room would haunt Fairfax County for nearly 30 years. It was the kind of crime that makes police think of passion. 49 stab wounds, most of them to the chest and neck. But no forced entry, no sexual assault, no theft, nothing taken except a life. And in another room, a 2-year-old child waiting alone beside her mother's body. Welcome back to Red Flags and Body Bags. I'm Chloe, and this is the case of Robin Lawrence. Robin wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She was an artist, a mom, a neighbor who waved when she backed out of the driveway. She worked in marketing and designed for a tire company, an odd mix of creativity and corporate. But it suited her. People who knew her said she could walk into a dull room and make it look alive. She lived with her husband Ollie and their little girl Nicole in a quiet West Springfield neighborhood. The kind of street where every lawn matched the next and kids were safe riding their bikes. Nothing bad was supposed to happen here. If you met her, you might have thought she was soft-spoken, but underneath, she was this quiet determination. She was one of those people who looked for beauty in everything. She painted at night after Nicole went to bed. She even talked about opening a small studio someday. It's almost unbearable to imagine that her warmth met that kind of violence that came through her back door. Friday, November 18th, 1994. Robin finishes work. She drops off her nanny around 6:30 and drives home with her daughter Nicole. Her husband Ollie is in the Bahamas for a business trip, and he travels often for the airlines that he works for. The forecast calls for rain. Inside the house, lights flicker against the windows. Sometime that evening, while Robin settles Nicole, someone approaches the property. We don't know exactly what drew him there. Maybe the faint glow of a lamp, or maybe nothing at all. Later, he'll say he didn't even know who lived there. He was just looking for someone. That's what makes this story so much harder to absorb. There was no reason. So when Robin doesn't answer the phone that weekend, her husband Ollie grows uneasy. Saturday passes. He calls again Sunday morning, still no answer. So he calls a family friend, Lori, and asks if she can go check on Robin and Nicole. So Lori drives over with another friend. She notices the newspaper first, then the silence. What happens next becomes the opening scene every detective in Fairfax will replay for decades. Lori stepping through that door, finding Nicole, and then the trail of blood. When police arrive, they find Robin in the master bedroom, on her knees, beside the bed. It looked like she had been pleading, maybe trying to shield herself. The killer's rage is everywhere. Splashes on the walls, streaks on the bedding, a slash through a pillowcase, 49 stab wounds. The medical examiner will later describe defensive cuts across her hands and forearms, meaning she fought back. But she was overwhelmed. One deep wound severed her carotid artery. So death would have been fast, but not necessarily instantaneous. The rest of the house is untouched. Purse is still there, jewelry still there, doors locked, no sign of sexual assault. So to detectives, it feels intimate and impersonal all at once. So they start with the obvious. The husband, Ollie Lawrence. He lands back in D.C. to find officers waiting at the airport for him. He's taken straight to headquarters, still in his travel clothes. They test his hands for cuts. They question him for hours. They check his alibi. It checks out. Plane tickets, hotel records, multiple witnesses. He was actually out of the country. He's cleared, but the damage is done. That shadow never really leaves a person. Police extend the search. Co-workers, neighbors, friends. Nothing points to anyone. They send the blood samples from the bathroom to the state lab. There's a small but crucial clue on the sink. A pink washcloth smeared with blood that doesn't match Robin's type. Whoever killed her was cut. Maybe nicked with his own knife and tried to clean up. He left his own DNA behind. So in 1994, that's high-tech evidence. Detectives get a full genetic profile. They feed it into CODIS, the national DNA database, and nothing. No hits. It's like having a fingerprint for a ghost. Weeks turn into months. Leads dry up. Robin's family, still numb from the funeral, offers a $12,000 reward. They hold a vigil, hoping someone saw something. A car parked oddly, a stranger walking late. But there are no witnesses, no sign of forced entry, and no clear motive. Detectives float theories. Maybe a jilted lover, maybe a random drifter, maybe someone she met at work. But there's nothing to tie any theory to evidence. So the case file thickens with paper and dust. Every year after that, the family calls the department for updates. And every year it's the same. We're still working on it. Now imagine carrying that for decades. Nicole, the toddler who survived, grows up with only fragments of memory. Photograph, secondhand stories, a hole in the shape of her mother. Her Aunt Mary will later say, it was an open wound that never healed. Years pass. Technology races ahead. So by 2018, the world watches California police unmask the Golden State Killer using something brand new, genetic genealogy. Instead of waiting for the criminal to upload DNA into CODIS, detectives find distant relatives in public genealogy databases and build family trees backwards until a suspect emerges. That same year, Fairfax detectives start contacting a Virginia-based company called Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon has pioneered this exact approach. So, they look again at Robin's case. The DNA from the washcloth is still viable. Before that breakthrough happens, there's one more detour we're taking. A small, almost forgotten mini story inside another Virginia case. In 1991, just a few years before Robin's murder, a young woman named Anna Gerardo was killed in her apartment not far from Fairfax. For years, her case was unsolved too. Then, decades later, genealogical DNA revealed her killer. A man who lived an entirely normal life for 30 years. That's the quiet horror of these cases. Time doesn't erase guilt. It just buries it under routine. By 2019, the cold case team hands Parabon the preserved DNA from Robin's case. They're warned the matches might be weak. Distant cousins, maybe fourth or fifth removed. The analyst on the project, a volunteer genealogist named Liz, takes the file home. opens her laptop, and starts building a family tree from a handful of strangers' names. It's tedious, fragile work. Every small connection means hours of digging through census records, marriage license, and obituaries. One wrong branch can derail this whole thing. So at first, Parabon tells detectives the solvability is close to zero. But Liz keeps going. She keeps telling herself, one more lead. Just one more branch. Years tick by. She's about to give up when a name pops up out of nowhere that makes everything click. A man, born in the early 70s, stationed near Arlington in 1994. His name? Stephan Smerk. He'd been a soldier back then. Now, decades later, he's a software engineer in upstate New York. He's married with 2 kids. And no criminal record. Not even a speeding ticket. He doesn't even look like a killer. But, genetically, he's the closest match they've ever had. Detective Melissa Wallace and John Long are assigned to follow up. They dig through military archives and find that Smerk was indeed stationed at Fort Myer in 1994, less than 20 miles away from Robin's house. He owned a white pickup truck back then. He left the Army quietly, moved north, built a respectful life. Everything about him says normal. But that DNA says otherwise. They decide it's time to knock on his door. In early September 2023, the detectives drive north, 400 miles from Fairfax, Virginia, to a quiet suburb in New York. It's early morning when they park on a tree-lined street. Neat lawns, kids' bikes tipped over in the driveways. A mail carrier waves. Nothing about this neighborhood says murderer lives here. They check the address twice, step out of the car, and watch a man wheel his trash to the curb. He's clean-cut, mid-50s, gray at the temples, and a father. He looks ordinary, because he is. He's also the closest DNA match they've ever had to the blood that was left in Robin Lawrence's bathroom. They introduce themselves. Detective Wallace, Fairfax County Police. We're following up on an old investigation. He nods, almost relieved, as if he's been expecting this. They ask if he's willing to provide a DNA swab. He doesn't hesitate. Sure. He leans forward, opens his mouth, and it's done in seconds. No protest, no lawyer, no nerves. He asks, what is this about? They tell him it's a part of an old case. He says, okay. Then he turns, wheels his trash can back to the house, and disappears inside. So the detectives drive away thinking he's just a rule follower doing his civil duty. They leave their business card on his counter and settle into a hotel to wait for lab results. But they won't have to wait long. The next morning, Wallace's phone rings before sunrise. A male voice, steady and deliberate. This is Stephan Smerk. He says, I want to talk. I want to talk right now. So within hours, he walks into his local police department and tells the desk sergeant he's there to confess to a murder that he committed in Virginia almost 30 years ago. So detectives rush over. They expect denials, half-truths, negotiations. Instead, he looks them straight in the eyes and says, I killed Robin Lawrence. He begins talking before anyone even asks any questions. He said, I knew I was going to kill somebody. I just didn't know who. He explains that in November 1994, he was 24, he was in the Army, and he was stationed at Fort Myer, about 20 miles west of Springfield. He said that night, he had 2 beers and took 2 ephedrine tablets, which is a stimulant, and drove with a knife in his truck. He didn't have a target. He said he just wanted to kill. He drove until he found a neighborhood that felt right. Quiet, upper middle class, no dogs barking, no street lights glaring into the windows. So he parked and walked, picked a house, Robin Lawrence's house. simply because it looked like any other house. He remembers seeing a child's toy outside. A tricycle, maybe? He saw a light through the blinds. He circled to the back deck, grabbed a fresh fallen branch, and he pried the sliding door open. Inside the house smelled like fabric softener and dinner. He walked through the kitchen, then down the hall. He noticed a crib in one room, a baby sleeping. And he kept going. In the master bedroom, Robin looked up. He said she gasped. He said she asked what he wanted. Then she started to kneel, hands up, pleading. He remembers raising the knife. After that, he says it was like being outside of his own body. 49 stab wounds. Chest, neck, face, and arms. The medical examiner later said several cuts were deep enough to nick bone. One slash severed her carotid artery. She likely died within a minute. He cut his own hand, went into the bathroom, ran water, and grabbed a pink washcloth. He wiped, pressed it in the wound, dropped it in the sink, and left. He took the knife, drove to a bridge, threw it into the river. He went back to base and went to sleep. He woke up the next day and went to work like nothing even happened. He said, I didn't know her. There could have been 50 people in that house. I wasn't thinking about that. I was only thinking about killing. And then, almost casually, he adds, if it wasn't for my wife and kids, I'd probably be a serial killer. I am a serial killer who's only killed once. Detective Wallace will later describe the feeling in the room like very heavy. She's been in law enforcement long enough to know bravado when she hears it. But this doesn't sound like bragging. It sounds like a man that's actually diagnosing himself. So, who is Stephan Smerk? Born in 1970, upstate New York. He was a good student. He was in Catholic school, and he was a Boy Scout. Joined the Army at 19. Served quietly. No record of violence. After 1994, he left the military, got married, earned a computer science degree, started working as a software engineer. His life reads like an apology letter to normalcy. But somewhere in that quiet life, he carried a private certainty that he had gotten away with murder. He told detectives that he thought about Robin often, but didn't even know her name until they actually told him. He said he felt guilt, shame, disgust, and still relief that it was finally over. When they asked why, he confessed before the lab results came back. He shrugged and said, "You were going to find out anyway. I was tired." The confession is enough. The DNA later confirms it. It matches perfectly to the blood that was on that pink washcloth. Fairfax prosecutors file a warrant for first-degree murder. Smerk waives extradition, packs his belongings neatly in a box for his family, and returns to Virginia in handcuffs. For the Lawrence family, the call comes in on a gray September afternoon. Mary Cowens, Robin's sister, is in her kitchen while her phone rings. The detective says, "We have somebody in custody." Mary drops to her knees. 30 years of waiting collapse into one breath. Nicole, the daughter who was only 2 when her mother passed away, hears the news and can only whisper, "They found the guy." The case moves through court faster than anyone even expects. The evidence is overwhelming. The confession is airtight. In October 2024, Stephan stands before Fairfax County Judge and pleads guilty. He doesn't contest a thing. He tells the court, "All these years I've been a coward, living with guilt and self-hatred. I hope my arrest brings closure." His plea deal removes the possibility of life without parole, but allows the judge to sentence him anywhere between 36 to 70 years. I mean, he's 53 years old. Even the minimum would likely mean he'll die behind bars. The sentencing happens March 7th, 2025. The courtroom is full. Robin's family fills the left side with siblings, cousins, and friends. Across the aisle, an empty bench. Smerk's wife divorced him after the arrest. His 2 children stay home. The prosecutor reads excerpts from the confession. I knew I was going to kill somebody. I didn't know who. I am a serial killer who only killed once. Then she looks at the judge and says, he got to live the life his victim dreamed of. That is the definition of injustice. Mary rises to speak. Her voice cracks. She says, my world shattered that day. For 30 years, I went through the motions of life, but I was never okay. Every birthday, every holiday, I thought of her and of that little girl alone in the house. Robin's brother, Robert, follows. He tells the court, we lived 3 decades of unanswered questions. Now we have answers, but we will never have peace. The judge listened, head bowed. Then he speaks slowly, weighing each word. This murder is among the worst in the history of Fairfax County. The defendant left a toddler alone with her mother's body for 2 days. He destroyed one family and built another. That cruelty cannot be measured. He sentences Smerk to maximum, 70 years in prison and a $100,000 fine. It's essentially life. Because of when the crime occurred before Virginia abolished the parole, Smerk could technically be eligible for a hearing after decades. But the judge makes it very clear, parole or not, this man will never walk free again, not with the weight of what he did. After court, Robin's sister Mary stands outside in the March wind. Reporters ask how she feels. She says, it brings closure, yes. But closure is not the same as peace. At least we can remember who she was, and not just how she died. Inside, Detective Wallace feels a strange quiet. For 29 years, the case file sat on her desk, and now it's finally done. She tells a colleague, that little girl can finally know her mother's story. Let's pause here, because this is where we'd usually end. A conviction, a sentence, and the words justice served. But Robin Lawrence's case carries one more echo. It changed how Virginia police used forensic genealogy. It proved that one preserved swab of blood could reach across 3 decades and name a stranger. And it forced the question, how many other randoms are out there? Men who killed once and folded themselves back into society. Psychologists studying these confessions say they're rare, but they're real. One single act, a secret carried quietly for years, surfacing only when the guilt becomes heavier than the fear of punishment. It's a phenomenon, sometimes called the one-and-done murderer. They live ordinary lives. They attend parent-teacher meetings. They mow lawns. And sometimes, at 3 a.m., they sit in the dark and hear a door sliding open again. For the Lawrence family, the story ends not in theory, but in a simple act of remembrance. Nicole Lawrence, now in her 30s, keeps one of her mother's paintings hanging in her apartment. It's a watercolor of a garden after rain. She said quietly to her friends that it makes her feel like she's finally back home. Mary, Robin's sister, says she can now look at her sister's picture and smile instead of cry. She says, we've waited so long. Now when I think of Robin, I see her laughing in the kitchen, not kneeling by the bed. That's what justice looks like sometimes. Not relief. Just the ability to remember someone as they were before the violence. There's a quote from a Commonwealth's attorney, Steve Descano, that stays with me. He said, the random and senseless murder of a young mother scarred Fairfax County for more than 30 years. The pain can never be fully healed. But I hope today's sentence closes this difficult chapter. Maybe that's the best any community can hope for after something like this. A chapter closed, not erased. In the end, this story isn't about a monster. It's about persistence. Detectives who refuse to shelf a file permanently. a scientist who spent 3 years tracing distant cousins. A family kept calling year after year asking if anyone remembered their Robin. It's about a washcloth sealed in an evidence bag that kept whispering, "I know who you are," until science was finally able to listen. Robin Warr Lawrence was 37 years old. She was an artist, a mother, a friend, a neighbor, who believed beauty belonged in every ordinary thing. Her murderer believed violence was power. Time proved him wrong, because 30 years later, a new generation of detectives, armed with her story and a strand of his blood, proved that even forgotten evidence can still speak. And that's why we tell stories. So the quiet houses, the unsolved files, the ghosts in suburban neighborhoods all get another chance to be heard. I'm Chloe, and this is Red Flags and Body Bags. Thank you for listening, and remember, red flags never lie.